Every year, thousands of people gather in Henderson, North Carolina to pay homage to some of the great racers of drag racing history. We're at the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame.
It's the same view every year. Completely packed streets of Henderson, North Carolina, the entire town of Henderson, North Carolina, for the 16th annual East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame induction ceremonies and reunion. Welcome everybody, I'm Brett Kepner to an event that we follow every year for the last 16. Let's start with a 2017 inductee who is actually one of the men at the roots of the pro stock movement.
These were basically street cars that you go to the local dealer, purchase, get your high performance package in it, and take it out and tune it, do whatever you had to do to it and make it competitive. And when I started, these cars were running 13 seconds flat. That's about it. And you know, if you had done your homework and had it working like it was supposed to, you could go down to 1250s.
How did you end up in the driver's seat of this car?
Well, my dad and I both were interested in drag racing. He took me out and we looked at some 409 performance cars, and so we chose a car like this to start with. And this is not the car, but it's a replica.
I was going to say it's a darn close replica.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there anything that's, a quick question, anything on this car that isn't correct?
No, its number's correct, and I think I'm lucky to have it.
When you got this car, like you said, 13 flat was a big number in 1960, but when you got this car, things were actually moving into the 11s at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
How quick was this car in general?
The bubble top 409, which you could run down the low 11s with it if you done your homework, and it was an amazing car at that time.
The Hall of Fame induction for you is long overdue, and it has to mean something to you.
Well, it does. It means an awful lot. And, you know, if it wasn't for people like you to get out here and recognize some of these local guys that have contributed to what the sport is, you'd be nobody. You'd be sitting on the corner.
Well, one thing's for certain, Richard Broom will never be nobody. This car is absolutely magnificent in its ability to take people straight back to the 1962 season. But there's nothing that can beat the real thing, the real heroes like Richard Broom. It's not just cars that line Garnett Street here in Henderson. You're looking at one of the most incredible vehicles on the street. This is Frank Spittle's amazing twin-engined V-twin Harley-Davidson called the Freight Train. 100% nitromethane in the tank. There's only a handful of human beings on the planet who would dare ride it. And this guy not only did that, but he's one of the best known historians and statisticians in drag racing history. You didn't just live this stuff, you breathe it, you eat it, you sleep it, and even 50 years later, you're not giving up on any of it.
Well, that's true. I mean, this bike is a part of my life, before I got into doing the drag racing reunions, I've had a 21-year career drag racing motorcycles, and this was the last bike that I raced, and actually raced it in 1985, the year that I had the first Superstock
magazine reunion, yeah. Exactly.
So I ran this bike in 83 through 85, and it was absolutely the best times of my life racing. I went to the IHRA Spring Nationals at Bristol in 83, and it was the first national event I attended with this bike, and it was a car race, not a motorcycle race. And there was 7 single-engine supercharged bikes in Top Fuel in this twin-engine Harley.
The last of a breed.
The last of a breed. And when I would do a burnout, even with all the noise that the motorcycle made and with my helmet on and all that, I could still hear the thundering
crowd
ovation,
yeah, right,
from the Harley people there.
Throughout this 1.5 mile long parade of machinery, you'll find an incredible array of drag racing vehicles, including Funny Car Row. No less than 4 machines of both the alcohol and nitro variety are lined up here, including inductees for the 2017 event that include the legendary Henry Sweetman. one of the only professional drag racers who came out of the state of Delaware. But this driver, indeed, has been at this game now for over a half a century. Henry, when did you start?
I'm not sure, around 71 probably.
Okay, and you started with a fast car. You didn't show up with just a street car. What was your first ride?
It was a big-ass dragster.
Yeah, and I think it went over 150 miles an hour first day out, didn't it?
Yeah.
Most people think, like I said, it's either a reproduction or you shined it all up and put new parts in it. This is exactly the same car.
Exactly. It hasn't had anything done to it.
And the one thing that happened between the time that you parked it and the time that you brought it back out was kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I got 2 boys, which are, involved in it all the time.
Your son Drew drives.
Yeah. Danny does the engine work. We all work on it.
Now, were they around when you were still racing the car?
Yeah.
Okay, so that they were brought up in it, whether they wanted to be in it or not.
Right.
But luckily for you, they do enjoy it.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
How much of their influence got you to bring this thing back out since it was sitting in the garage?
Well, they're the ones that talked me into buying their first original funny car.
Oh, no kidding.
I'd had dragsters up until then. So that's how it started. So they've been with me since the beginning of the funny cars.
But the very fact that you're looking at an untouched 1980 funny car that still campaigns respectably is one of the most amazing aspects of the father and son Sweetman team.
Dream Rides is being brought to you by Steel Rubber Products, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping. East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame. Evapo Rust, super safe rust remover. And by Dustless Blasting, it's the future of surface preparation.
Welcome back, everybody, to downtown Henderson, North Carolina, and Garnett Street, packed with people and unbelievable race cars for the 16th consecutive year. This is our exclusive coverage of the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame and Reunion. And, of course, the woman who for 16 consecutive years has somehow managed to get this perfect weather on this particular event. One of the largest gatherings of drag racing vehicles, and for that matter, street machines, too, on the eastern seaboard. It is absolutely perfect weather again, and people are really beginning to believe that you have some kind of inside line.
I don't know, but we certainly have been blessed with beautiful weather. Thank goodness.
I hate to say it, but we sound like a broken record. I think there's more cars here this year. There certainly appears to be a lot of new cars here this year, cars that haven't attended this event in the past, and you can barely walk, so there's plenty of people. Did you expect it to jump again?
Yes, because we had so many phone calls and so much activity on social media. I did expect to have a crowd here today. So we're so lucky, and we have people that come from all over the country, and we have 2 from Hawaii.
Really?
Yeah, Bruce Willis and Rick Lucas came from Hawaii.
Everybody thanks you from the bottom of their heart for continuing to keep this alive and making it bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know how you're going to top it, but you always manage to.
Well, Norman Dickerson and I run the tourism office, and we organize it, put it together, and it just seems to flow because we've been doing it now for 16 years and hope to continue. And thank everyone for supporting the event.
Of all the Pro Stock superstars that we've already inducted into the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame, one of the most notable was Billy the Kid Stepp, the Dayton, Ohio veteran who campaigned a variety of Chrysler cars, some of them the best looking cars in the class's history, that indeed have seemingly disappeared. But this guy seems to have, well, maybe found one. Is it real?
Well, it is now. This represents about a 3-year project that we culminated about 10 days ago.
No kidding.
And
is this its first show?
This is absolutely the debut of this car.
Wow.
And so we chose this event. We have a number of cars, but this was the first time we've attended this event. And it's just incredible, the huge crowd here.
Yeah.
But there's a huge Mopar crowd here, and they absolutely love this car.
I will ask you if you worked in cooperation with any member of Billy Stepp, the late Billy Stepp's family.
Well, we've got a member of our team, Mike Thomas, who worked for Hedman Headers for many, many years. And Billy always ran Hedman Headers on his cars. So he knew Billy Stepp. And he's got a connection with Billy's daughter, Nina. And we needed that connection to make it all work, put it all together.
Well, Billy Stepp is certainly one of the best known colorful drivers. The stories behind the man could fill another TV show. But it's people like this that are keeping not only Billy Stepp's memory, but the memory of all of our Pro Stock heroes alive. At the 2016 edition of the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame and Reunion, we presented to you one of the most outrageous drag racing vehicles of all time, the Ida Automotive Hemi Healy that thrilled fans up and down the United States East Coast for years. But in 2017, the same gentleman, Bob Ida, is being inducted into the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame. So what did he do to pass the time in the year since we saw you last?
Well, we thought we'd recreate our 409 Willys double B gas car.
Now, this is the car that you ran prior to the Healy. A lot of people say that the Healy is the car that made you worldwide, global infamous. But the Willys was actually a record-setting car before the Hemi Healy.
Exactly, it was. That car was able to run 2/10 under the national record at will, and it was a good car for Super Eliminator.
At this point, a lot of people have reconnected with you, but it has to be weird for you because you're such a key figure in the automotive technology world with your street rod manufacturing and customizing. You're running into people you haven't seen in a half a century, too.
Yeah, that's right. It's great to see them again, and it's memories. I always talk about the memory bank. I always say there's two types of banks: when you put money in, when you put memories in, and it seems like the memory bank is my bank.
Absolutely. How long did it take to put the Willys back together? Or, for that matter, is it the original car?
No, this one is not the original car. It's a clone to it. And actually, my late cousin Vinny was 14 years old the first time we built the car, and he was with me to build this car almost to completion.
No kidding.
Yes, and he reminded me, he said, Bob, do you realize that it's actually 50 years to the season that we're building this car again?
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the streets of Henderson, North Carolina for the 16th consecutive year. This is the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame induction ceremonies and reunion. 4 years ago at this very event, we covered a most unique situation. We were talking with Wayne Jessel, one of the most legendary stock and junior stock racers of the 1960s and 70s, as he discussed a possible business deal with a gentleman whose car we were filming for the show. It was a beautiful black 1956 Chevy sedan delivery. It was exactly the kind of sedan delivery that this guy raced 50 years ago. Here we are 4 years later with the finished product that just popped into your head that day, maybe?
Yeah, it did pop into my head that day. I saw the car as soon as I got here at the show, and I immediately went over to him and said, do you want to sell that car? By the end of the weekend, we kind of worked out a deal, and then a week later, he said, let's do it, so I went and picked the car up.
Everybody knows that Wayne Jessel doesn't do things unless he can do them perfectly. It was important that that car was also in pretty darn good shape that you got it from him.
It was. It had to be a really stock car because that's what we had to start with years ago. So I found a very, very stock car in this one. It was a challenge to try to find the correct parts to restore it to replicate what we ran 50 years ago. And fortunately, we were able to do that. It's the correct transmission, engine, drive line, interior, paint color, lettering, everything it's probably 90% of what we had 50 years ago.
And your desire to make this thing as perfect as possible ends up being one of the only real accurate junior stocker museum pieces on the planet now.
Well, it probably is. I'm sure there's a couple of them that are original cars. We felt that the quality of this really came out the way we wanted it to. And if everything goes right, it will go to the NHRA Museum in January.
Fantastic. That's got to be beyond the dream that you had of what could be done with this car.
Well, it is, especially with the museum has most of the California dragsters, funny cars, and so we talked about it at the Hot Rod Reunion, and I think we're going to take it out in January for them to hang on to it for a while.
There's another interesting twist to the fact that it might go to Glendora, California for the NHRA Museum, and that's the fact that this car was almost built to spite the National Hot Rod Association.
Well, it was. We found kind of a loophole back in the day. I was with Jerry Stahl, and we came upon this because it was a truck, we were able to use the hydromatic transmission.
Well, while Wayne Jessel has already been inducted into the East Coast Hall of Fame along with his brother, the Jessel Brothers Parts Emporium is now globally known, but so is this car, the most meticulously restored junior stocker of all time. To the fans who don't remember this car, it sure is a strange sight, sitting here with nothing underneath the hood and something behind the driver. In 1966, however, this was the ride of the reigning National Hot Rod Association Top Fuel World Champion Maynard Rupp. It was a 1965 Chevelle, at that time, factory experimental car, with a supercharged nitro-burning power plant about, 6 inches behind Maynard's head. This man has reproduced this magnificent car, and I might add, pivotal in the history of funny cars. None of this is real? This is a reproduction?
Yes, sir. This is the real deal.
This is the real deal?
This is the real car.
Where in the world did you find it?
I bought it out of Columbus, Ohio, back in 1986.
Seriously?
Absolutely.
Advertised or just word of mouth?
I accidentally found it through what I was doing at Corral. I used to sell stuff at Corral fall events, and I met met a guy who directed me to the guy that had it.
What was the first thing you did with it? Store it?
Stored. Just sat on it for a few years, didn't know what I was going to do with it, but just knew I wanted to keep it. I actually thought maybe I had lost my mind when I bought it because it didn't look all that pretty, but took it home anyhow and thought, I couldn't walk away from it. It was a piece of history.
Absolutely.
And also keep in mind, this had carpet in it.
Oh,
It has real door panels on it. It has a headliner above the roll cage. They were very fanatic about, they were trying to keep the car looking like an original car.
Yeah.
It's got working...
Even though the rear wheel wells were almost to the back bumper.
Yes, they had to move them back. It has working headlights. It has a working dome light in it, all of which they were very proud of because, you know, it was in their concept to keep it looking as original as possible.
Yep.
They put a lot of heavy things back on, like the trim, the fake hood scoops that were on the hood, put them back on so it looked original. All of which added weight, all of which slowed the car down a little bit.
And then when the Comets came out, they were pretty much worthless at that point. These cars were pretty much worthless. On behalf of everybody, thank you for finding it, thank you for saving it, thank you for displaying it, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having the show. I mean, it's we're enjoying ourselves immensely. Getting a lot of people talking about the car and trying to explain what the history behind it so everybody understands what it actually did, where its place in history is.
Dream Rides is being brought to you by Steel Rubber Products, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping. Clamp Tight, the clamp making tool. Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radio since 1977. And by Z-Max, the one product for your engine, transmission, and fuel system.
Welcome back, everybody, to Henderson, North Carolina, where the streets are packed with fans and race cars. This is the 16th annual East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame induction ceremonies and reunion. You know, every year we get to see a vast array of drag racing machinery at this fantastic show that includes, well, crazy stuff. But the guy standing in front of this fuel altered has a little bit more history behind him, hence his recent induction into the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame. Bill Naves has been at this game for quite a while.
Me and my wife do almost everything we could possibly do. The kids now have grown up and gone their ways, except for Jagger. He's stayed around the car and taken over a whole lot of the booking of the match races and stuff. So right now we're looking at the possibility of putting him in what we call the B car.
I should point out that you were, hardcore funny car guy for at least 30, 35 years.
Yeah.
Yet the fuel altered thing has really piqued your interest. Are you seeing more booking dates for the fuel altered than the funny car?
Not really more booking dates. The way the funny car bodies have changed over the years, the vision is getting worse and worse as far as your peripheral and where the windshield is and stuff. So we found that when we went to one of the newer Dodge bodies, I really had no idea where I was at sometimes. So
it's a good time to switch to a car where you can sit.
Yeah, we started looking at the Altereds, and my goodness, I can see the front tires and where they touch the ground. So it's an incredibly different feeling in the car. I feel much more confident. It's just a lot of fun.
Well, that opens it up for showmanship too, because if you feel confident and you can see things around the car, you can do the stupid burnouts and maybe nick the wall with the headers and stuff like that.
We do that. We've even cut down a few rows of corn lately.
One of the best known teams on display each and every year here on the streets of Henderson is the S&S Racing Team. When it comes to gas coupes and sedans on the Eastern Seaboard, these were some of the best known cars anywhere. In fact, they developed a nationwide following because of the incredible amount of exposure they got in the racing magazines throughout the 60s. Fred Bear has been involved with this team really since its roots. Fred, when did you become an S&S guy?
1962.
Wow.
Gene Altizer joined the team, or really with S&S Parts in 61. And in 62, Chuck Stolze, that owned it, asked David Hales and I to join. In 63, K.S. Pittman from the West Coast joined us, and in late 63 to early 64, the Filthy 40, Charlie Hill and Pork Zartman joined. All the cars were always S&S red, except Charlie, and
black.
It had to stay dirty.
Which was the first team car that you actually drove?
My first team car was a 55 Chevrolet, and David Hales and I had almost identical 55 Chevrolets, painting, lettering, pinstriping. You had to beat us all. Before that, most team cars were really competitors and, and didn't share. Years later, the Alabama gang did the exactly same thing, and they became famous for it, but we did it, and I think that was a lot of our success, is that none of us ever gave up. We all jumped in and made the best of what we had.
Well, it's time to put a period on another visit to the city of Henderson, North Carolina, and another edition of the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame induction ceremonies and reunion. Two amazing photographs of a dirt drag strip in the state of Virginia that opened in 1953. It was known as Old Dominion Speedway. The man who opened that drag strip is an inductee of the East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame. He's also what we believe to be the oldest living inductee to any drag racing Hall of Fame, as he turns 99 years old. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Al Gore. And with Al's permission, we'll bid you goodbye till next year.